As you can see with the ribeye here, you've got several distinct pieces. You've got the cap here, you've got the bone, and then you've got a nice center cut, which is almost heart-shaped on this particular ribeye. So we're going to take it out and then we're going to cut it right at its natural division. So you'll have a nice big chunk, almost shaped like a fillet, and you'll have a nice flat piece. Okay. The bones, you can roast them up and use them for stock, or you can do almost anything you want with them because they have really great flavor and they have a fair amount of meat on them. Okay. But for our purposes today, we're just going to take that right off. Okay. And of course, it's going to stick a little bit because we're filming, and that's usually what happens when you've got a camera. Okay. So if you had several ribeyes, you could roast up those bones and use them for stock. And then there's this little tiny piece here, which we're going to take off. And what we like to do with this, as you can see it's got nice red marbled meat, is use it for like a steak tartare. On a steak like this, you can just garnish one of the other pieces of meat with the steak tartare if you don't want to serve it by itself. Okay? And when we do an entire ribeye, we save all the fat and we render it out in a pot. But because we're just doing one really thick steak today, we're not going to do that because it's not really quite enough fat. Although cooking meat in its own fat gives us this really wonderful flavor, and it actually caramelizes beautifully. And you can do it the way they used to do chicken fat in the old days, and you can cook an onion in the fat while you're rendering it, and that gives you both onion cracklings, but it also flavors the fat with the onion. So even though you strain it out, the flavor will still be in there and it will be imparted into the meat when you cook it. So if you had more fat, you could definitely do that. Now here, what I like about butchering is the fact that everything makes sense and you can just kind of follow the lines. If you see the membrane here on the fat cap, and you can actually follow the lines, you slice along the fat and it will peel right off. Okay? And I'll use my knife to make it a little bit easier, but the meat separates at the muscles, and that makes it much easier for you when you're butchering, because really you're just following the natural lines. Okay, and this is a really nice piece of meat. Everything's coming off beautifully. When you see butchers who do this all the time, they literally just pull it right off like that. They're not quite as gentle and delicate as I was trying to be there. Okay, so then for this we are just going to take off that extra bit of, oh, helps if you have the knife the right way, the extra bit of fat, and clean this up. Now, when we cook at home and ribeye is on special, my aunt is not a big fan of ribeye because it's too fatty for her. So what we would do is we would clean up this piece like so and just give her the center cut. Because unlike many people out there, she does not like the fat cap, which is the outer piece, which we're going to get to next, which is actually Alex's favorite piece. So he's always happy to buy ribeye for Aunt Marie and give her the center because he gets extra fat cap. Okay? So again, you want as much usable meat as possible. That way when you're sitting down to dinner, you don't have to actually butcher your meat again. Okay? So it's sort of, I don't know, would you call that kidney shaped, this piece of meat, and then we're just going to divide it right here. So you have one nice kind of center cut steak, okay, perfect for Aunt Marie. And then you have this smaller steak, which you could slice thin or you could cook by itself, and we'll play with some ideas for that once we're done with the butchering, okay? And then that leaves you with the fat cap, which is right here. A lot of restaurants will serve this piece by itself, and actually when we used to work in Maine, we had a restaurant, we were chefs at a restaurant out there, we would serve a nice piece of center cut, and then we would have this fat cap on the side, and we would take off the fat, the extra gristly fat, which is what I'm doing here, and we would tie these up into an individual steak and serve a piece of roasted center cut and a piece of roasted fat cap. Because for anyone who has had prime rib knows that the fat cap cooks faster on the outside. So if you actually remove it from the center cut and cook them separately, you can have both pieces cooked exactly the way you want them. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for this last little bit here, I'm just going to run my knife along underneath. Okay, and you want to be careful when you're doing this, obviously, because you don't want to cut yourself. But sometimes that's the easiest way, to just slide under this very top layer and peel it right off. Okay, and there's just a little bit more right there that I need to get rid of. Okay. And I know it seems like we're cutting it down to almost nothing, but it will be worth it. Because everything that is left will just be delicious.
Right.
Okay, so now we have this nice piece of the fat cap, and I'm going to try my hand really quickly here. And we are going to actually season it up with a little bit of salt. So that way, once you have it rolled up, it will be seasoned from the inside. Okay? And because it is a thinner piece, you just want to do a really light sprinkling of salt. Okay? And then we're going to just pound it a little bit so that when we roll it, it rolls up smoothly and you don't have a lot of holes in the center of your meat. Okay? So I'm going to put that here. And I'm going to start from the fat end because it'll be a little bit easier for the narrow end to kind of tuck around the center of the meat. Okay? So then you're going to have this nice roulade, and we're going to take some butcher's twine and just tie it together. So, left over right, right over left. And I actually have to remind myself of that every time, because for some reason it's harder than you would think to remember how to tie a square knot. So, left over right, right over left. Okay, and we're just going to cut these strings so that they're a little bit shorter. Okay, and then you've got this really nice roulade of the cap. Okay, and we'll just sear that off. From our one rib steak, we have our bone. Okay, we have our little nugget that we can actually dice up for tartare. We have our smaller fillet type piece, which is like this. And then we have our nice big fat center cut, okay, for one big appetite or two smaller ones. And you have your beautiful piece of rolled ribeye cap. And that's it.